for coming to Leadership Essentials. My name is Tammy Takahashi, or Tammy, either one's fine. And I've been a Toastmaster since 2007. And currently, I'm the president of Toastmasters for Leaders, a new advanced club in the district. I'm also the vice president of education for Open House Toastmasters, and I'm an accredited speaker, or not accredited, what's it called, Dick? A qualified speaker in Golden Gap.
You're on your way to apprentice speaker.
I'm on my way, one day maybe, 20 years from now. So this is the first time I've given this particular workshop, but I've been working on developing this presentation for many years. Many years ago, actually my whole history before I joined Toastmasters, I never ever considered myself a leader. How many of you here right now currently consider yourself to be a leader? Halfway there, okay. I would not have raised my hand. I would have said, no, I'm not a leader. I'm the one who helps the leaders. I'm the second-hand person who will story behind the leader and pick up after the leader and hand the leader the things that they need in order to do their job, to make sure the leader's job is easier. That was my role, and I was very happy with that role. Then I joined Toastmasters. Now, actually, before I joined Toastmasters, I was in other situations where I was called upon to be a leader, and I said, no, I don't want to do it. So I joined Toastmasters in 2007. And why do we all join Toastmasters?
It's fun.
Just look at it. As Neil explained to us, because it's fun and friendly. But the reason why we go into the door in the first place is we want to learn how to be better speakers. We're either terrified of speaking, or there's some reason that we need to learn to speak better. For my situation, I'm a writer, and I published a book. And I was incredibly nervous that if I got interviewed on Oprah, I would make a fool of myself. I've never been interviewed on Oprah. But just in case I didn't want to make a fool of myself. So I wanted to get some training on speaking. Although I'd done some workshops and I'd done some roundtables and panels and things, I felt like my speaking ability was not really where it should be in order to be filmed permanently on film forever and ever. So I decided to join Toastmasters. So we all join Toastmasters to learn to be better speakers. Well, then what happens? What happens when you join Toastmaster? You get assigned to be a timer. You get assigned to be grammarian, counter, ballot counter, and then eventually evaluator. And then after you've done enough of those, then you get asked to be sergeant at arms and secretary. You get asked to do all these roles. And because I wanted to help the club and be a part of the club, I said, okay, I'll do that, okay, I'll do that. And before I knew it, I ended up being president of one of our clubs. This is me not wanting to be a leader. So what happens at Toastmasters? You start out that way. So I spent a year as president of Earnest Speakers. This was in 2009, or 2008, 8 to 9. And I didn't necessarily want to be president, but they really, really thought I'd do a good job. But I wanted to be VPE. I wanted to be treasurer. I wanted to be the backup leader, the one who's supporting the president. But I ended up doing it because I liked the club and I wanted to help. During that year, I realized that I actually had quite a bit of leadership skills that I'd been building up along the way. I just didn't know it, and I didn't have any opportunity to practice it. But I wasn't a spectacular leader. I did a good enough job. But I was learning a lot of skill along the way. And then during this time, a little bit after this time, I thought, well, I'm becoming a better leader. I'll go ahead and start doing some more leadership things in my community. And so I decided, because I have 3 children and we homeschool, and I'm really involved in the homeschooling community, writing articles and writing PRs and things. They asked me to step up and be the president of this statewide organization in California. So, hey, I was president of Earnest Speakers. No worry, I can do this. So I stepped into the president hat. Oh my gosh, it was a disaster, an absolute, terrible, horrible disaster. By the end of my tenure, everybody on the board hated me. I had a lot of people who were in the organization who heard my name and they thought, oh, Tammy. And I didn't know why. What the heck was going on? It was a great job, I thought, and there were speakers, and I come here, and it's just flop. What's going on? And I felt like I was doing an okay job, but a lot of people were giving me all this negative feedback. I got letters written to me, practically hate mail, but then I have a few other trickles over here, and people say, no, you're doing okay, you're doing okay. I didn't know what to think. I had no idea what to think. So I left just kind of emotionally distraught. Am I a leader? Am I not a leader? What's going on? What's going on? So I put more energy into Toastmasters. I want to find out what I'm doing wrong. Why is this not working for me? So I put more energy into Toastmasters. I really focused on my new roles in my new club. I was president again in another club. Why am I successful in here and wasn't in my community? So over time, I started gathering materials little by little, here and there, about what makes a successful leader and why in some situations leadership is easy, sometimes it's hard, and what makes one person a successful leader over another. So that's what I want to talk about today, are this accumulation of knowledge and what I've experienced as what are leadership essentials in general, and then I also want to hear from the group what your experiences are, because everybody's experiences are different. Little graphic, in case you didn't get the concept of leadership. But actually, what my question is to you, is what is a leader? And that's a big, big question I had to ask myself when I was going through all this research myself. Is what is a leader? What does it mean to be a leader? So I looked up in the dictionary, and this is what the dictionary has to say about it. A person followed by others. A person who guides or motivates a group of people for a common goal. But is this a good enough definition? What do you think? Does this suffice for you? Do you feel like that's what a leader is to you? Partially. Okay, so what do you think would be a little bit better for this definition?
The key word is motivate right there.
Motivate?
Yeah.
Okay.
But a leader also knows how to follow as well.
Okay.
Knows how to listen.
Listen?
Yes.
Okay. So as a definition of a leader is a person who, guess what? In your estimation. Yes?
Sometimes a leader is just a person with charisma.
Okay. But what, right, okay.
Well, I was going to say that a leader is a person who can develop leaders.
Okay.
More leaders.
But what is a leader do? How do you, what would be the, how would you know someone's a leader? What are they doing that's, because I think this actually hits on the general idea that we're leading a group to a common goal.
Another key word would be inspire.
Inspire, okay, who inspires.
Knowledgeable.
And you said motivates was a good one too. Motivates.
Encourage.
Encourages.
What about mentors?
Mentors. Okay.
Empowers.
Empowers. Looking on good track here. Anything else?
Coordinates.
Coordinates. Anything else?
You didn't get leads.
Leads, but this is yes. Stands in front of others. Should I put that?
Yes. Conducts.
Conducts.
Yeah.
Drives. Okay. He's standing behind. Whew. All right.
Communicate.
Communicates. Communicates.
An ideal.
Communicates an ideal.
Good example.
I love this. An example is an example.
Works harder than the followers.
Works hard. We'll stop there. Then we got to
Harder
go.
than
I'm into delegating. That's my thing.
You work hard to delegate.
I work hard to delegate. I like that one.
I like that one.
All right. Last
A
one.
leader is someone who walks the talk.
Okay, so an example.
Yeah.
Who works hard in order to
Achieve.
achieve
A common goal.
Okay, yes. And I think that this is actually a really important part of all of this. All of this works together for this final goal of a leader. A leader does not work alone. You have to have people with you to be a leader.
You're assuming that the common goal is already there. But sometimes without that leader, the group wants to fight. We want to have someone that says, this is the place we want to
Right.
go. So they kind of create the common goal, not
Right.
just that it's there.
Uh-huh.
Who envisions? Envisions?
Envisions.
Visionary.
I think what we're discussing is leading through consensus. The group agrees.
If the group doesn't have a common goal, can the leader lead them?
You're not going anywhere.
Right, and I think this, actually we'll touch on this later, but that's one of the reasons why I had so much trouble in my organization, is this particular part. But I think this is really important for us to remember that as leaders, we're not there to drag people behind us kicking and screaming, even if they don't want to do it. We are not there as leaders to force people to do things they don't want, but to create and move towards a common goal. I think that we're done here. I think that's the main point of leadership, and that's something that I didn't really understand that idea when I was president of the club for the first time. That common goal already existed, so I just kept going with what the common goal was. But when I joined the new group, that there was no common goal. We were all different places. I assumed there was, but there wasn't. So the kickback was because they disagreed with me on what even the goal was in the first place. So I was trying to lead a lot of ants that were going in all different directions, telling them to go this way, and they didn't want it. So that common goal was a really important thing for me to learn as a leader. So what we're going to do, you remember this at all? Yeah, recognize this? What magazine is this from? Do you remember? Highlights. There's a magazine that's been in existence since what, like 50s? 60s? Something? Yeah. Called Highlights Magazine. I read it when I was a kid, and my kids read it now. They still publish them. And in every issue, there is a little cartoon called Goofus and Gallant. Goofus and Gallant. So this is Goofus. He leaves his books spread all over the floor. And this is Gallant. Gallant picks up his papers when he's finished. So this comic is to teach children how to be a good citizen, how to be polite, how to be respectful, and they give these two extreme examples of the perfect child and the most terrible child in what he would do. So what we're going to do today is we're going to think of, similarly, we're going to think of our own Goofus and Gallants in leadership. What would our gallant leader look like? The one who's the perfect, ideal leader of the universe? And what would our Goofus leader look like who doesn't know their head from a chicken? Or I should actually say more, for Goofus it'd be more just not skilled, or doing the opposite of what they should be. Now my intention was to put this all on my computer and type it as we talk. Unfortunately I had technical difficulties, so I can't do that. So we're going to do it on board. Okay, and this is where on your sheet there's 4 quadrants. On the top left you can do yeah, where it says leadership essential, or leadership
Yeah, this is leadership.
yeah, essentials, yeah. Effective leadership, effective leadership. On the top left it says effective leadership.
Yeah.
There's a little space there you can do it. If you run out of space, you can use the back side. All right, so who wants to start off? Gallant. What does a gallant leader do? Somebody already said earlier, listens. Let's do that this time. Yeah, listens. All right, what a Goofus would do, opposite.
Interrupt.
Not listen well, yes.
Talk while others being different.
Talk, ignore,
Interrupt.
interrupt. Okay, another one for gallant.
That's the probably actually some leaders, and probably myself actually I would say, we don't pay attention.
Okay.
It's not that we don't want to ignore, but we are paying attention because we are thinking of something else.
Distracted.
Distracted.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Distracted and distracted.
Yeah. All right, so gallant now. What would you do? Or she?
Take responsibility.
Take responsibility.
Living more.
All right. What would be the opposite of that?
Irresponsible.
How about blame?
I meant in terms of shifting blame.
Blame.
Blame is the blame.
Blame anything and everything.
Anybody
The
else.
weather,
downplay.
I'm gonna downplay muscle. All right, next up. Is that?
Well, one of the key things is selfless. In other words,
Like
selflessness. In other words, they
Brings the best out of
selflessness, and then opposite be selfish.
yeah.
Okay. And so when we say selflessness, we mean willing to give others opportunities, even though maybe to our own detriment, or
You're looking out for others more than you actually looking out for yourself.
Okay, looking out for others. And willing to give up, giving somebody 3/4 of a cookie, not 3/4, kind of idea. Giving up on that for other people who are okay to
Like
do
my
less.
mother.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. In the red, right there, I've got there, yes.
It kind of bleeds in, and it's sort of part of that one, but being humble and being arrogant, like, sort of similar with that.
Okay. Great. Yes.
How about, I don't know if power is the right word, but sharing of power versus hogging of power.
I think that's kind of,
It's gotta be delegated.
that's what I was known for. but-
Delegating responsibility,
Yeah, delegate
delegating.
responsibility.
Because there's some leaders that,
Yeah,
you're right, they want to do everything themselves.
And so they take all the responsibility, delegating responsibility and sharing accolades.
Yeah.
And then for this, delegating responsibility would be doing everything themselves, maybe.
There's quite a few of those around.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, and then sharing accolades, the opposite of that would
Oh,
be
we never defaulted to that very much.
taking all the credit.
I worked with the boss once that he couldn't function unless there was a crisis. If there wasn't a crisis, he ain't make it.
Okay, so drama queen.
That would be under group.
Or king.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Okay, and then what would be Gallant's behavior is the opposite of Gallant?
Well, the opposite are to have things organized and running smoothly.
Okay, organized.
Call the meeting.
Emotionally stable.
Emotionally stable, that's
That's a good one.
That's
That's
really
important.
good.
It's hard to be emotionally stable.
Yeah, that's a good one.
How about
Emotionally mature.
consistent and steady?
Yeah, that's a good one. Consistent.
Steady,
Consistent.
okay.
Stable.
All right, we could go on for a long time on this. This is a start, and you can do this more at home on your own if you like as well. I've done a lot of this kind of thing for myself to understand the difference of a healthy leader versus an unhealthy leader, and healthy reactions to leadership versus unhealthy reactions to leadership. So what I'd like to do next with this same list is to draw a line between each thing of this. This line represents the spectrum. The spectrum from 100% awesome, perfect person who doesn't exist, to 0% person who is terrible and also doesn't exist. Because nobody is completely 100%
What happens?
Nobody is completely 100%. And what I would like you to do is to mark on that continuum, kind of like I did there, where in your mind is an acceptable level for an effective leader. So imagine, for example, imagine somebody who you consider to be an effective leader. Perhaps the Dakota Kumagai, District 52 governor would be an example. Your club president, somebody you work with, someone in politics who you think is a good leader. Put that person in your mind, somebody who you feel is, and then think too, at what point would be okay for that person to be. So for example, for me, he listens and talking and being distracted. I can put up with about 80%, I'd say. And then below that, I start to think they're not so effective. And above that, it's just candy. So what point on each spectrum where will you think it's okay for an effective leader to be? Take responsibility for me, I'd say 90% for that one. on mine. Selflessness and selfish, probably like 75 on that one for me. Anything below that, it's starting to get ineffective if they want that to be. Humble and arrogant, I can put up a little bit more with that, so more like 70. So on your list, go ahead and mark each of those. And then the other side of it is to mark where you would just unequivocally not work with that person. Okay? So for here, I'd probably be at like 50%. I think I would, if somebody were about 50% not listening to me when we're having discussions, that's about when I wouldn't be mean to them, I wouldn't think about, I would probably not choose to work with them. Taking responsibility versus blame, that's a small window for me, so probably like 80, because that's really important for me. So for you and with your spectrum, where would you just unequivocally not work with that person? You're okay with being in them, maybe being in the same club as they are, or them being around, but if someone said to you, hey, will you team up with this person to organize an event? No. So where on that? And that's your range. That's kind of your range of, you can get an idea of what you're willing to accept. And then also you can see what you can think is to be as I wish I had done this when I was working in that group, because I would have been able to see person by person why I was responding to each person that way, why they were responding to me. All right, the last thing to do now. Anyone got a guess what they're going to say next?
Where do we stand?
Where are you?
Where are you? Exactly. Where are you? Where do you think you are on these spectrums? Very good. Somebody knows me. I don't know where the voice came from. So where are you on that spectrum? Okay. That gives you kind of an idea of where your mind is and what kind of leader you like, what kind of leader you think you are, where you think you might work, where you think you're awesome, all that. And this is a good exercise too if there's somebody who you have difficulties working with, or if you really like them as a leader, and help you understand why you have a relationship with them. And then, also what I'd like you to do is just for this one, everyone all kind of at the same time, what's your number for the effective leader number? Shout out.
85.
90. 90. Who listens? Shout out, everybody.
80.
80.
70.
70.
85.
85.
2.
2. Everyone's keep shouting.
More of a listener than a talker.
Okay.
That was my reason.
My point is for this
Are we
exercise.
rating ourselves?
No, no, this is the number that you feel is an effective leader. So the plan, the reason why I had you do all that was to show that everybody's number is different. And for each element, everyone's going to have a different level of what they're willing to either put up with or what they find to be important. So one leader may really appeal to one set of people, and another leader may appeal to another set of people, and there may or may not be crossover, and it could be. So, for example, there were a couple people in this group I worked with that I thought, how could anybody want to work with them? Anybody. They're really difficult people. But after doing this, I realized that those people had different criteria of what they felt was a strong leader than what my criteria was. And so when they were judging me about my leadership style, they were judging me based on their criteria of what a leader was, not based on my criteria of what a leader was. So I had to learn what my own criteria for a leader was in order to judge my own performance, rather than trying to rely on everybody else's feedback of why they thought I was a good or bad leader. It's important to listen to what they have to say. It's important to know how others perceive us. But I had to learn to understand what my values were, my leadership values were. Because this exercise defines for you what your leadership values are. The things that you like to see in others and leaders, that's what your leadership values are. And we all have different values. Yes, Dave?
Well, how you define it, but I'm reminded by your experience of having a leadership heart. You could have turned away from this experience and said, I will never go there again.
That's
But instead, you went inside yourself and looked at the answers.
I did both. I did both. I will never go back to an organization like that again. Ever. I can see how dysfunctional it was and what kind of position they put me in unprepared. So knowing that now, if someone asks me to be a leader, I can look at my various experiences and say I can lead in this part, but not lead in this kind of. At the same time, I looked into why it was that I didn't succeed. The organization is still a mess. There's no leader they brought in 5 leaders since, and nobody succeeded. So that leadership situation is a mess, so I can recognize that. Really, unless somebody steps in and does the dictatorship, there's really not going to be much to change. All right, so what happened when I did this exercise is I boiled down for myself what I felt were the 5 essential leadership qualities. I kind of bundled things together and put them under subcategories. I won't go through the whole process of this, but this is what for me, boiled down to. Perhaps you share this with me, perhaps not. But my goal here is to share it with you to give you an idea of what my perspective is and my experience, and then you can take it home and decide for yourself whether you think that's the same, whether you agree with me or not, and what your leadership values are. So first of all, what I've seen in the effective leaders that I've worked with in Toastmasters, I've also started a knitting guild. I'm the president of the knitting guild, and I work with very effective leaders there. Also in politics, in my family. Family's a great place to look at examples of Goofus and Gallant. Yes, I know. And what I noticed is that every effective leader has a grand vision. And what I mean by grand vision is that it's a vision that is so big that it requires other people to be a part of it in order to succeed. So for example, as a knitter, I can have this vision, this really powerful, important vision of becoming the best knitter on the planet. But that vision involves nobody but me. But if I have the vision to start a guild and I want to grow it to 100 people so we can have really good events out in public and really promote knitting to the group, that's something I cannot do alone. So in order to lead, we have to have a vision that is so big that we can't do it by ourselves. And so big that if we try to do it by ourselves, it won't succeed. We have to have a grand vision of some kind. And that's another thing I was lacking when I was working with this organization, is I didn't have my own grand vision. I just wanted things a certain way. And people weren't complying, which is different than having a grand vision. Now looking back, I don't know if having a grand vision would have solved my problems, but it would have made me feel better about my own leadership effectiveness personally. That I knew what I wanted. I knew that I wanted everyone to work together as a team to grow our organization to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that they didn't agree with me. Was not a common goal. But my role there was simply, let's just check mark the boxes and make sure everyone's doing their job, which is a vision. And I think that in Toastmasters clubs, we all share a grand vision together as a team. We have a vision of having a successful club. To have a club that people come in and they're excited to be there. They like they get their needs met. They work as a team. And that's the clubs that are successful, is when there's a grand vision that's bigger than simply one person deciding this is how everything's going to be. We're going to get it. The second thing that, for me, I've noticed with all the effective leaders that I've looked at is that they have a vast array of knowledge on the topic that they're leading in. And that they also recognize at the same time that they have more to learn. So they have a vast knowledge, but then if somebody approaches them and says, hey, you know, I read in the manual that that's not how it is, or if they question the leader, are you sure that's the way things are? The leader is not afraid to go, you know what, let me look and see if that's the case. And that's one thing that I was struggling with in my group, in my homeschooling group, is I would ask the people who were there before me, are you sure that this is the way things are supposed to be? And their reply was, we know how things are. This is how things have been done. This is the tradition of our group. This is how it's going to be done. They did not want to be questioned. And I find the same thing is true in Toastmaster clubs too, that leaders who are willing to go, hey, let's look at the bylaws. Let's look at the Toastmaster manuals. Let's talk about this as possible changes, while at the same time they have a very good understanding of the Toastmasters program, are really effective leaders. The third thing is that they like people. I know this seems really kind of obvious, but there's a lot of leaders out there I think don't really like people. And they're trying to control people so that they're happy, rather than doing it because they want everyone in the room to be happy, because they like them. So I had to really dig deep down in myself and ask myself, do I like people? Am I doing this because I like people, or because I want things to be a certain way and people happen to be a handy resource to get done? Once I came from an approach of, I really like the people I'm working with, even if they frustrate me, even if things are difficult. Deep down, I like them. I want them all to succeed, just like I'm succeeding. I want them to be happy. I want them to achieve their goals, in addition to the grand vision. It becomes much more positive leading experience. And I think as people who are with leaders, we want the leaders to feel that way about us too, and we feel good with them. So I feel that, from my experience, that effective leaders just like people. They like, when you talk to them, you get this feeling of they're like, yes.
Well, to translate that, an effective leader will have good results, and an ineffective leader will have minimal results.
So I couldn't put the last thing.
An effective leader or a good leader will have good results or great results, and an ineffective leader will have marginal results or no results.
Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah, absolutely true. Great leaders will have better results than ineffective leaders. The fourth thing I notice about effective leaders is that when there's a problem, they see it as an opportunity, rather than seeing it as something's wrong with other people. That's actually a really common, ineffective, doofus way to handle situations. Oh, there's a problem. That must mean something's wrong with other people. When problems are presented to an effective leader, you feel like they're going to help you solve the problem. They're not going to get all upset that there is a problem. And in fact, they may even use that problem as a way to make things better than they were before. That's an effective leader, I've noticed. And they're also people that are much easier to work with in general, whether they're leaders or not, are people who see problems as opportunities. It makes it just easier to work with people so that if there is a problem, everyone just hunkers down together. We're a team working to figure this out, rather than suddenly becoming infighting of who's going to do what, why, and who's supposed to lead this. And last is consistent value. We touched on that in stable and steady. We all have our values. We can go through this and we have our values. But in order for them to really be values, they have to be consistent. I don't know if you know who Jon Stewart is. He's a comedian on his comedy channel. And he says, if you don't follow your values in times of difficulty, they're not values, they're hobbies. If you don't follow your values on times of difficulties, they're not values, they're hobbies. So we have this ideal maybe of what our values are, but what our values actually are what we do in times of easy and difficult. So consistent values means that our values don't change depending on the situation. Our values stay steady. If we value listening, for example, then listening stays steady whether we're listening to someone we like or listening to someone we don't like. If our value is taking responsibility, then that won't change whether it's a really difficult thing to have to admit you did wrong, or if it's an easy thing to take responsibility. Those values don't change, they stay steady. And when we work with leaders who have steady values, we know what to expect from them. And if we ourselves have steady values, then we know how to respond to every situation according to our values, and we have integrity. So these are the 5 essential qualities that I notice in effective leaders, and almost everything that's detailed falls under most of these categories. There's some exceptions, but most of them fall into these categories.
That's a question.
Yes?
This being Toastmasters, how come communication isn't one of the most important things?
I believe communication is intricate in all of it. It's part of everything. When you like people, you communicate with them better. When you see problems as opportunities, you communicate that in how you speak with people. When we have consistent values, our communication with people will be our values speaking for us. I believe that for leaders, I think there's different levels of communication skills and a lot of different personality differences that you can have one person with all 5 of these qualities be a completely different person than another person with these same qualities and communication levels. So I believe it's integral in all of it. But you have a good point. It's a really good point. Communication skills is an integral part of being an effective leader. Yeah.
Actually, leadership is like public speaking. Nobody wants to do it. I mean, people by nature are sheep, and so that's just a comment. Who wants to be a leader?
It's scary to be a leader because one of the reasons why, as we mentioned earlier, is taking responsibility. If we become leaders, then we are then responsible for a lot of things, and that's scary. It's hard to do, and there's oftentimes as leaders we're expected to really kind of step up our game, and that's hard to do. Yeah.
On the consistent values, values are, I mean, they're specific to that person, right? But how about principles? Like certain universal principles that might be always there, as opposed to the values that are just in line to the person.
Right.
Like the golden rule or
Like
something
an
like that?
example.
Something like that, but like integrity and all that stuff.
Yeah. So integrity is another thing that I think individuals still vary on, of how important it is for them to be a man of their word, a person of their word. Some people can tolerate somebody who disappoints more often than, for example, I have a very low tolerance for people who don't follow up on what they say. But another person might not have, that may not be as high an importance for them, so that may not be a value that's as high. I think it's a sliding scale. The values are all there. It's just a sliding scale of where you are on that, on how important that is.
Oh, okay. So the principle, I mean, you have the principle, but then it depends how you value it.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a really good way to put it. If you have a principle, and your values are where on that principle line you sit.
Oh.
Yeah, does that make sense? And then this is just a longer list. So I wanted to give you an example of kind of how I worked through this. This is a longer list that I made for myself, and then I pared it down to 5. So I went through a bunch of different things that I thought were important to me, the top 10, 15, and then I just pared it down to 5. But these are all important to me too. Just because I have those top 5 doesn't mean that there are not many, many other things that are important. But I feel like those 5 are really, really essential.
Each one of us will probably have our own top 5.
Yes, exactly. Each one of us in this room will have our own top 5, and we'll have our own list here of where, because there's probably at least 100, maybe more different qualities of a leader that we could put on a list. But who we decide to follow and how we decide to be a leader, we can only do so much. We can't be gallant in every single category. So this allows us to realize what's the most important and what things that we're thinking about. The next thing I want to talk about, and see how much time do I have. Everything on time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Really quickly, I wanted to talk about trust today. Because I think trust is a huge element, it's a key element of leadership. In order to follow somebody, we need to trust them. In order for us to convince others, motivate others, and inspire others to follow us, they need to trust us. So I went through the same exercise for trust. And this is the list that I came up with for trust. Does it look familiar?
Yeah.
It's the same exact list. When I was doing this workshop, I thought I'd have 2 different separate lists, but I came up with the exact same list, and then I wrote my reasons why they were the top 5. And I realized that leadership and trust are almost the same thing. They're intimately linked with one another. That in order for us to be great leaders, we have to foster trust with others, and this is what fosters trust. That's what I found. So if you want to do that same exercise at home with the trust and the leadership and see if yours matches you, it'd be interesting to see what you get. Are you done taking notes from there? Hold on. Oh, yeah, I guess I got a little smushed when I switched it over. We know what to expect from them, and they have integrity. So when we were making our list of what's an important, essential qualities of leaders, one thing that we didn't mention is physical fitness. And according to the ladders.com, which is a website that places, it's an employer placement website, employee placement website, they said that 75% of executives that they questioned questionnaire said good physical fitness is critical for career success at the executive level. 75%. When I was looking at quotes for today, I was trying to find some. It's really hard to find quotes, by the way, for leadership. Statistics. I saw that and thought, really? Of all the statistics they have out there, physical fitness is top 75%. That's really strange. But it really made me realize that we all have different ideas of what essential leadership is and effective leadership is. And the takeaway today, I hope for you, coming out of this, is that there's no such thing as a goofus, and there's no such thing as a gallant, and that all of us are somewhere in that spectrum, and everyone we work with is somewhere in that spectrum, and it's all a matter of what we personally perceive as acceptable and unacceptable. It's not because that person is a bad leader, no. It's because I don't accept that kind of leadership value or that kind of leadership practice. Taking responsibility for what our perceptions are. And that person is on the spectrum where I'm not comfortable. That these 5 essential qualities are all effective leaders. That's, I hope that, just from my perspective, and they also create trust. And again, nobody is a perfect leader, and nobody is a terrible leader. We're all learning, especially in Toastmasters, where the goal here is to help each other grow and become better leaders and communicators. A lot of our clubs don't focus on leadership. But I think that's changing slowly because we've changed the branding in Toastmasters. But even though we don't focus on leadership, there is still a lot of leadership practice and leadership. We ask people to be leaders on a regular basis. So even though we may not know that we're practicing our skills, we actually are. This is a perfect venue. This is probably the only place in the world where we can safely practice leadership skills and not worry about being a goofus. And if we are a goofus, that somebody will help us learn to go closer to the gallant side by both modeling it for us and giving us feedback. And just a plug real quick, one of the places that we do that is our Toastmasters for Leaders Club that you can flyer for. This club is an advanced club. In order to be a member in this club, you have to have completed either 8 CC speeches, competent communicator speeches, or 8 competent leader projects. You are welcome to come as a guest anytime and to just absorb the wonderful leadership aura of the group. Every meeting we have a leadership theme. Meetings run on that theme. We have an educational portion where somebody talks about some sort of leadership aspect, either within Toastmasters or in general. And then at the end, we also have speeches, 2 speeches, and evaluations. We give evaluators feedback to help them, because we feel that evaluations are an essential leadership quality skill. So we give evaluators their feedback. And then at the end of the meeting, we have a 5-minute roundtable where we talk about a leadership issue. So, for example, we'll bring up, there's somebody in our Toastmaster club who is continuously interrupting people. What do you think we should do? We all go around and talk about different ideas and how to make that work for us in our club. So I invite you all to attend that one. So, lastly, here's some resources I'm going to just throw your way. See if you wanted to do more research after this. You're so excited now by this workshop. You're out there ready to be effective leaders. Let's go do it. Here's where you can start with your next level of leadership. This blog, Leadership Freak, is a great blog. He has little short clips about leadership every couple days. It's a nice blog to follow. John C. Maxwell has about 1,000 books. These are a few examples of some that I like. This one, 5 levels of leadership, I think is one of his best. It's a pretty recent one. He goes through how there's different, for example, the first level of leadership is when you're assigned the title. You're a leader simply because you have the title. And then he goes, the second level of leadership is you're a leader because you have good ideas. And he goes through the 5. And then the 5th level of leadership is you are not you're not just moving towards a vision, but you're creating other leaders too. So he goes through that. That's really great. And the last one is Stephen Covey. He's 7 Habits of Highly. He's changed my life. That's Terry up there. Terry does a speech regularly on his books, and one that he did with the quadrants.
Oh, yeah.
That changed my life. I totally get it now. It's like a light bulb moment. He's great. And then Seth Godin, if you like things a little more out of the box, a little more innovative, a little more looking at things from more a social media perspective. Seth Godin's great.
Cool.
So I want to leave. Oh, did you get all that, everybody? Yeah. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Steve Jobs.
Ooh, I like that.
Steve Jobs was a crazy guy. And in the beginning, he was a little bit on the goofy side for some of his leadership skills. I don't know if you've read his biography. Anybody here read his biography yet? It's really fat, but it's really interesting. And he starts off, he's got the vision. He's got the vision, and he's got the knowledge, but he doesn't have the people skills so much, and some other things are missing. But then he evolves, and by the end, he's got it all, and it's a really interesting read. So Steve Jobs is a good example of this evolution of understanding and moving towards the sliding scale towards gallons. I think an inspiration to us all. Thank you, Steve Jobs, for all you've done. And thank you all for coming today. Please fill this out before you leave. Let them know how fabulous I am, so that I can come back and get paid more.
You get evaluated?
I did. Armin's evaluating me. Everyone signed in, Steve? And everyone got a handout? The two handouts? The second handout, I forgot to mention it. The second handout here with the questionnaire is a little self-assessment, leadership assessment. This is actually a poll from the HPL manual. The HPL, by the way, the HPL project I forgot to mention earlier was another life leadership changing project for me. I did the HPL project because I had to. In order to become a DTM, you're required to do the HPL. I didn't want to, but I did it anyway. It was transformative. I actually followed the requirements. I had my little meetings with my committee. I had them give me feedback and the whole bit, and worked through doing a contest with them, an area contest. And by the end, I knew exactly from this and their feedback, I knew exactly where my weaknesses were, my strengths. I got a lot of support, and so it was a really great experience. I encourage you to do the HPL on a big project, not a little one, and actually go through the whole book, meet with your committee, get your feedback. I really encourage you to do that. I know it's a lot of work, it's a pain, nobody wants to do it, but once you do it, you'll look back and go, thank God I did it. Thank God I did it because it was such a great experience. Like so much in Toastmasters, huh?